Let us explore how the Buddha stayed enlightened. This evening's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. The question begins, how did Buddha reach a permanently high level of consciousness that never went away? The question continues, how? I saw he fasted, but on YouTube they claim it was not important or not needed. Whoopsie. In my trial of errors, I felt that long-term fasting was the only thing that brought permanent consciousness change, even if you stopped meditating. I have not been a big fan of meditation. I've not been a big fan of meditation these days because I feel like the results go away once you stop. So this is an intelligent question from someone who is very, very earnest in their search, and I respect that. And there was a time when I asked the same question. There was a time in my life when I studied neurolinguistic programming, neuroassociative conditioning, and every other form of self-hypnosis and self-help you can shake a stick at. And when I studied neurolinguistic programming, they were talking a lot about states and state management. I remember one time working with a chiropractor or an acupuncturist, and they also spoke of states. So this is not out of left field. The problem is that we live in an interdependent universe. That's weird. Let's see here. There we go. All circumstances, bodies, relationships, and minds, the four bases of mindfulness, affect each other and are affected by each other, directly or indirectly, overtly or subtly, immediately or eventually, actually or potentially. So in this, as we say in Yiddish, this mishigas, or as you might say in English, this Hungarian goulash of interdependence, change is an inevitability. But wait, there's more. So any enlightenment that is based on a state is doomed to be fleeting. Fortunately, that is not what the Buddha offered us. What is the enlightenment that Buddha offered us? It is simply mastery of the Eightfold Path, getting so good at the Eightfold Path that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. And I think I wrote that over here. I guess not. I guess I wrote it over here. Spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. So, how does that work? How is one able to do that? Well, the Eightfold Path can feel overwhelming for creatures such as us who only have 4 fingers and 1 thumb on each hand. Fortunately, they can divide up into 3 uneven groups. But instead of going there, let's go here. There are the two most important facets of the Eightfold Path is inhalations, mindfulness, and exhalations, meditation. Now, that doesn't mean mindfulness of inhalation. Au contraire, it means that inhalation functions as a carrier wave, making mindfulness possible. A type of mindfulness that is, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, and I do apologize for that. So think of it this way. Mindfulness and meditation are sufficient in and of themselves. The more we practice them correctly, the more effortlessly we experience the remaining 6 folds of the Eightfold Path. So let's explore that. So the way we begin to really, so there is so much confusion surrounding mindfulness and meditation. Good evening, Jay. That I find it's most helpful to begin by looking at it through the lens of neuroscience. Fine. And that only makes sense when we look at it through the common mistakes. When we look at it through the common mistakes, the solution makes more sense and is so much easier. So let's do that. The common mistake makes sense when we look at it through the reference point of Sturgeon's law, which is 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. What could that look like? Well, that means that, for instance, 90% of meditation teachers are terrible. What does that mean? That means that by their own admission, 90% of meditation teachers sincerely feel that being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel is optimal. One has only to attend a Zendo or a Tibetan Gonpa or a Theravadan Vihara to see that firsthand. Maya Angelou insisted that when people show you who they are, we do best to listen. I guess I would be remiss if I didn't say that 10% of meditation teachers are fabulous. They sincerely believe that being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind is the way of peace. And I would agree with them. So let's take a gander at an artist's simplified side view or cross-section of the human brain. Those who are rigid and controlling will often insist that the key to mindfulness is active concentration, and the key to meditation is active analysis. They even have fancy-sounding Pali words for that, such as samatha and vipassana, or if you prefer the Sanskrit equivalent, shamatha and vipassana. It's a subtle difference, but they mean the same thing. Well, what's wrong with that? Surely 90% of everyone can't be wrong, or could they? The only way to practice either active concentration or active analysis is to engage with discrete mechanisms, such as the ones found in either our medial prefrontal cortex or our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. If you are a neuroscientist, please forgive the simplicity of the diagrams I'm using. Now, what's the problem with that? Simply this. Between you and me, this prefrontal cortex is astonishing. It's kind of like, a Swiss Army knife. Man, if you want to contrast, compare, calculate, analyze, edit, proofread, this is an amazing tool. It's like a Stradivarius. But, like all Stradivarius, it's high-strung, it's fragile. And if we work it too much, our amygdala gets stimulated. This amygdala, the size of a large pea or a small almond, this amygdala is the seat of aggression, anxiety, and rigidity, and controlling tendencies. So the great irony is the more we use our prefrontal cortex in an effort to dig ourselves out of our anxiety and aggression and crankiness, the more we will get stuck in it. It's like trying to do the Australian crawl when you're stuck in quicksand, according to the movies I saw when I was a little boy. So, movies about quicksand, not movies featuring meditation. Is there a solution? Yes. Yes, there is. The solution is not found between our ears. The solution is found in our central nervous system, which, although it does include our brain, it also includes our autonomic nervous system, specifically its two facets, which I'd like to explore with you in greater detail. We'll begin with mindfulness. Whoopsie, there we go. Mindfulness, the seventh fold of the Buddha's eightfold path. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are wired to automatically and effortlessly access our sympathetic nervous system. Where is that? It's found in the middle third of our spinal cord. It facilitates a special type of perception that is vulnerable, passive, visceral, random, and fleeting. And this should sound a lot like yin. This should sound like the 10% who are all about being flexible, loving, laid back, rational, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Those psychological phenomena are accessed physiologically, which is great, because all we need to do is cooperate with our physiology in an optimal way, and those states, those traits, will be locked in effortlessly. Let's continue. So, every time we inhale, we are wired to access our sympathetic nervous system that helps us perceive all manner of things. In addition to sight, sound, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, it helps us to perceive emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. Now that can sound a little overwhelming, especially because there's such variety, there's such a range. There's the external and the internal, the physical and the mental, the pleasurable and the painful, the interesting and the boring, the glorious and the grotesque, and all places in between, all points in between. I've got some additional good news, and this pertains to meditation, the eighth fold of the Buddha's eightfold path. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, we automatically access our parasympathetic nervous system, located in both the lower third as well as the upper third of the same spinal cord. This parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. When I was a little boy I guess I wasn't really a little boy, but when I was in high school, my stepfather bought himself a grandfather clock and like all grandfather clocks, it had a slowly swinging pendulum. And similarly, as infants, we do not content ourselves with but one inhalation and one exhalation, and then call it quits. Au contraire, virtually every minute of our lives, we are inhaling and exhaling, usually multiple times. Thus, a single state is impossible, because with every fluctuation of our breath, from inhalation to exhalation, we're dancing from sympathetic to parasympathetic. But, you might ask, if you're half as clever as I suspect you are, but you might ask, hey man, if I've got this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, why bother meditating? Why aren't I already a Buddha? Here's the answer. In a word, Urkel. Due to a quirk of evolution, this brain is so jam-packed full of organelles that are accidentally stepping on each other's toes and sticking elbows inside each other's eyes. It's kind of like a clown car. But here's the wild thing. So just like Urkel, who's forever saying, did I do that? After accidentally creating havoc. The organelles of our brain, which are kind of packed in there like the personal storage center of a hoarder, is so busy contradicting and confusing, it's undermining all these processes. However, humans are privileged because we have language. And yes, language is frequently abused or squandered. However, during my first 3-year retreat, it was taught to me that with words we guide our intention. And with intention we orchestrate our mind. Check this out. Every time we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, oddly enough, this big old brain begins to cooperate with our sympathetic nervous system. But wait, there's more. Every time we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, this same old brain begins cooperating with our parasympathetic nervous system. So these are not affirmations. They're labels for processes that are going on right now. By playing with these two words, we get to help our brain cooperate with these two mechanisms. Now, how do these two mechanisms cause the remaining 6 folds of the path to take care of themselves? Consider this. 50% of the Buddha's 8-fold path pertains to loving kindness. There is kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, and kind commerce. Remember how we talked about when we overuse our prefrontal cortex, it stimulates our amygdala, and we get as anxious and cranky. As anxious as Smithers and as cranky as Homer can get. But when we cooperate with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, A, this amygdala calms down. And B, this hunk of meat right here that looks like a backwards letter C gets stimulated. This hunk of meat that the cool kids refer to as the anterior cingulate gyrus. This hunk of meat that functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and compassion and love. Does that mean we will never have a cranky or selfish thought again? No, we'll have them. But there's a difference between having a thought and being controlled by the thought. Between having a thought and having that thought control our choices and our utterances and our deeds. So here's what happens next, and this is wild. The more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more those exact same choices, utterances, and deeds flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. Now, lots of people who practice active concentration and active analysis feel cranky. They don't want to feel cranky, and so they try to analyze love and concentrate on love, which of course just feeds their crankiness, which is very, very sad. This is why the late Tukul Tundap, as well as the late Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche insisted that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived, that the highest love comes not from contriving through concentration or analysis, but just through being laid back, watching and releasing, and harmony with our inhalation and exhalation gives our anterior cingulate gyrus breathing room. It allows it to give birth to love that is centered and spontaneous. When our choices, utterances, and deeds flow with the effortless effort, which is the sixth fold of the Buddha's eightfold path, then life is so much more workable. Yes, we still experience the same spectrum of human emotions. Of course, now we're even more finely tuned to it, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. We're less controlled by it, which is fabulous. Einstein insisted that creativity was intelligence at play. In the delightful movie 15 Minutes, the protagonist advises his protege, you cannot come back to a problem unless you first walk away from it. Countless Nobel laureates in their intellectual quests, once they've exhausted their intellectual methods, had to rely on spontaneous creativity for the next branch of analytical methodology. This is a common phenomena when reading the life stories of the great luminaries, be they scientific or literary or philosophical. So we've explored 7 of the 8 folds of the Eightfold Path. There's one remaining, and that's ironically the first one. Right view. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. There's a part of us that's still a little child, frightened of the thunder, that longs for the safety that we think is found in consistency, and is disappointed because in this universe in which we dwell, the only constant is change, as the cliche goes. So here's the great irony. The liberating view of reality is one of change. It is not an intellectual bauble to be actively contemplated. Au contraire. Sit comfortably in meditation. Notice. And you cannot help but observe change, even if you try not to. What we see changes from moment to moment. Right now I'm looking at a potted plant, and now I'm seeing a lamp, and now I'm seeing the fence. We're wired to scan through our senses as a survival mechanism. We resist that at our peril. The peace we seek comes not from fighting our instinct, but dancing with it, cooperating with it. Sit in mindfulness, we cannot help but notice change in what we see, in what we hear. In fact, sound is itself change. It's oscillation, which is change. We notice changes in what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we taste, what we smell, and the like. How much more so the changes we notice from moment to moment in what we emote, in what we intend, in what we conceive, in what we recall, in what we imagine. Noticing these changes and releasing our resistance to these changes is the first fold of the Eightfold Path. So let's talk about practice. You can start off modestly, maybe 5 minutes every 12 hours or so the first week. Perhaps 10 minutes every 12 hours or so the second week. Maybe 15 minutes every 12 hours or so the third week. Continue thusly, and by the conclusion of the 12th week, sitting for 60 minutes could become child's play. Doing this twice a day, or thrice, or 4 times, or 6 times a day, finding ways to do it sustainably and pleasurably, and before you know it, you've gotten so good at this eightfold path that you practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. Hey, health comes and goes, illness comes and goes, favorable circumstances come and go, painful or disruptive moods come and go. But through the midst of it, we're able to practice the eightfold path. As a child, I found the mastery of tying my shoes, being toilet trained, learning how to ride a bike, to be Herculean tasks. And yet I was able to master them. There came a point where I could tie my shoes so masterfully that I did them, I tied them spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. Same thing with you using the potty or riding a bike at one point. We are wired for mastery. We are wired to master skills, and the eightfold path, which 2/3 or 3/4 of which comes from just mindfulness and meditation, is within our grasp. I think it could be great fun to practice together as a team after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to meditate like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Oops, I think I hit the wrong button. Let's try number 5. I am neurodivergent, which means I have to use hacks to sit and meditate. I don't know if it'll be helpful to you. The only way to find out is to give it a shot. Try these hacks over the next 14 days and see if they work for you. But give it a good fortnight before you pass judgment. Fair? All right, here we go. I would like it very much if we were able to perform 4 collections of 144 rounds. What's a round? We can pretend that a round is simply 1 inhalation followed by 1 exhalation. So we collect 144 rounds by collecting 12 sets of 12 repetitions or rounds. So how do we count the initial 12 repetitions or rounds? Simple. During the inhalation, we can slide the tip of the thumb to one set of creases and a second set of creases and a third set of creases, beginning with our index finger and then our middle finger, then our ring finger, and then our little finger. Practice with me during the first set of 12 rounds. Remember, this during the inhalation, ease during the exhalation. On our left hand, this is my right hand, this is my left hand. On our left hand, we're able to count sets. So that was our first set of 12 rounds, and now we can start our second set. Now, there is a third metric, and that is our collection. So we count our collection on the knuckles of our right hand. The great knuckles, specifically, consider, if you will, the great knuckle of our right index finger. We can rest it gingerly upon the fingertip, the tip of the left index finger, and place both our hands gently in our lap. We don't have to sit in full lotus posture. We can gently relax from the hips and let gravity do its work. If you can't sit this way, don't worry. Gravity will do its work over the course of the fortnight. So when we get up from meditation, our body's in a different position. And all the variables are in flux, but that happens all day long. Meditation is not to select a state. We select what we experience at our peril. It's to get us really good at noticing and allowing. But remember, noticing in a manner that is vulnerable, passive, visceral, random, and fleeting. Now, I'm probably breathing faster than you because I'm doing all this jibber-jabbering. So please do not judge yourself if you find that I'm breathing faster than you are. As Morticia Addams said to Gomez at the end of the first Addams Family movie, Gomez, do not torture yourself. That is my job. Although I'm not clever enough to have invented Bengali crease counting, um, I think I'm wired to practice it. There are photographs of me as a toddler playing with my fingers. Before we begin our third collection of 144 breaths, allow me to get you up to speed. The most efficient way to practice mindfulness is to silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, that we might better perceive. And perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. The most efficient way to practice meditation is to silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, that we might physically relax and mentally release. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 and a quarter hours, 10 and 3/4 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tomorrow's early morning meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.